Well, today the car makers sat before Congress and asked again for many billions of dollars in loans and public assistance to pull American auto manufacturing back from the brink of extinction. But how did GM and Ford and Chrysler get to where they are right now? The fashionable argument is to blame them. They built bad cars, they built the wrong cars, oversized gas guzzlers for the short-term profit instead of fuel-efficient alternative energy cars for the long-term, long-haul, sustainable market advantage. And some people, many of them Republicans, like to fold the auto workers into this argument. If only there weren't unions, they opine. Those dastardly laborers. They have the temerity to unionize and earn too much money and have too much health insurance and get retirement funding. No industry can survive with greedy, organized workers like the poor Big Three has to contend with. Well, never mind that a veteran UAW worker gets about $28 an hour at a Big Three factory, compared with $25 an hour at the non-union Toyota plant in Georgetown, Kentucky. Must find way to blame unions somehow. But there is another case to be made, even if you are mad at the management decisions, even if you're mad at labor. You would also be mad not to notice that nobody's buying cars right now. Maybe that's the problem. Sales last month for the Big Three were down more than 40% compared to this time last year. Sales are also down for Toyota and for all the other car makers. Nobody's buying cars. And in large part, that is because potential customers cannot get loans from the banks to buy cars. Today, the Big Three CEOs made that case, that essentially they would be upright and making strides and not prone and clinging to life if American consumers could borrow a little money to buy the cars that the Big Three makes.
We have 240 dealers that have thrown their keys in because they have not been able to get access to financing. We have another 250 that have put on credit hold. That's impacted us another 63,000 units on an annualized basis.
The banks have been the biggest recipient of the Bush administration's bailout largesse so far. And you know, you can't actually spell largesse without large. Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson made the gamble that unlocking this whole credit freeze could be done by injecting large, huge amounts of capital into the banks. Give the banks some cash and they'll start lending again, right? Simple idea. Or maybe not. According to the car makers, it's just not happening. The public money has gone into the banks, sure. It's just not flowing out of the banks in the form of loans. The blame the banks sentiment has apparently caught on with a number of senators who bashed the not-so-lendy moneylenders for hoarding billions of dollars that taxpayers have already given them.
You guys have been put under far more scrutiny than the people up here on the board for far less money. And the fact, when I listen to you guys testify, that you can't even get credit, and that's what this was for, is nothing short of ridiculous. And I would love to have those birds in here again, because they need to be talked to.
Those birds. If it is a credit problem, no one can get loans problem, not a management problem or a design problem or a labor problem that has brought us here. We could blame the banks for their current stingy lending practices, even after getting that public money. Some lawmakers, like Chris Dodd, are now moving away from the "we need to help the banks" camp and towards the "what the heck did Hank Paulson do with all that money" camp.
The Secretary of Treasury is in China right now. It's time to come home. We got a serious problem on our hand, and I realize he's got a meeting over there, but we need him here. I am through with giving this crowd money to play with. So I feel very strongly about it in terms of how they've mismanaged a lot of this.
It is easy and it feels reasonable to say, with no small measure of disgust and contempt, hey, banking fat cats who screwed up, we nearly drowned you with our hard-earned bailout money. Dish it out already. But you know, to be fair, you could also make the case that it is not as simple as that. Right now, banks see us, Americans who they might lend to, as a bad credit risk. They don't think lending us money is a good investment. One industry survey out today says that the number of American consumers with bad credit has risen sharply since last year, with more than 110 million Americans now dealing with having a bad credit history. And it's easy to see why. It's not an outbreak of bad values among Americans. It's that in the last 8 years, median income has stayed flat while the cost of just about everything, particularly higher education and health care, has skyrocketed. We've got the same amount of money to spend pursuing the ever more expensive American dream. So maybe Hank Paulson can give the banks as much cash as he wants to. They're not giving it out to us Americans if they think they won't get it back, if they think we're not creditworthy. It may not be fair, but this fundamental problem led Elizabeth Warren, the head of the congressional panel monitoring the bailout, to offer a dire assessment this week to the New York Times. She said this, quote, "If the answer is that banks do not have money to lend, it would make sense to push capital into their hands. But if the answer is that their potential borrowers are getting less creditworthy with each passing day, pouring money into banks isn't going to fix that problem." That's us, American citizens, American families, less creditworthy by the day. If the problem is that Americans and American families are hurting, that we are not a good risk anymore in terms of our future ability to pay stuff back that we borrow today, then are any of these industry bailouts going to work if we don't bail out the real economy, which is based on the real American people? Joining us now is Ohio Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown. He's a member of the Senate Banking Committee, and he questioned the big three CEOs at the auto bailout hearing today. Senator Brown, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Glad to be back. Thank you very much, Rachel.
Are the automakers in trouble right now in part because of the credit crisis, because nobody can get a loan to buy a car?
Yeah, they're in trouble for a lot of reasons, and they're certainly blamed to go around on management. They've not done perhaps the greatest job in the last couple of decades, but more to the point, I think your point is exactly right, that consumers can't get credit. Not just consumers can't get credit, but there's not enough credit available back and forth among the auto industry and the suppliers and the car dealers, and so it's just difficult to do business that way. The second reason people aren't buying cars, as you say, is the recession. People either have lost jobs, or their buying power is not what it was, or they are anxious about their job in the future. And if you're not sure about what your job's going to look like, or what your pay is going to be, or if you're going to have a job a year from now, you're not going to go out and buy a new car. You're going to get the car fixed that you have and try to put another 12,000 miles on it and hope that you can get up to 100,000 or 150,000 miles on that car. And that's what American consumers are doing.
Well, if the consumer spending piece of this is part of the reason that what we've spent thus far in industry hasn't helped us come out of this economic spin that we're in, is there a case to be made that we need to do some bottom-up bailing out, that we need to dump some federal money on the middle class and the working class somehow?
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren's exactly right. We need to do a lot of things. We need a different trade policy. That's hurt the auto industry. It's hurt American manufacturing. You said something at the top of the show which I really thought was important. You said, imagine a United States where there is no domestic auto industry. I mean, imagine a United States that continues to lose this much manufacturing. Because to me, this is all about a manufacturing policy, all about Americans making things, because we have a middle class in this country because the backbone of this country has been we make things, we sell them to each other, we export them. We're a more prosperous country because we've had a strong manufacturing base in most of the 50 states. So, but directly to your question, we should follow what Sheila Bair wants to do. She's a Bush appointee at FDIC, used to work for Bob Dole. She wants to put money directly into helping modify loans so that homeowners, so we can keep people in their homes, we can stabilize home prices. That'll make a big difference. And then it really is what we do next year. At the beginning of the year with President-elect Obama, we need to prepare a national economic recovery package, have it on his desk, I hope, about the time he takes office. Everything from unemployment, extending unemployment insurance, to rebuilding infrastructure, to alternative energy, to all the kinds of things with a manufacturing policy that will put people to work and strengthen the middle class. Then many of the problems that we're dealing with now we will begin to grow out of.
Senator Brown, your home state of Ohio, I think, is second only to Michigan in terms of the number of jobs that depend on the auto industry in some way. It does not seem like there is an appetite in Congress right now, even in the Senate, to bail out the auto industry. I honestly, just as an American, can't imagine that we will let them fail. Do you feel like you know how this is going to end? Is this a game of chicken? Is this political posturing? Are they really going to let the industry fail?
Well, I think in the end, people didn't want to vote for the bank bailout. I don't want to vote for money for banks. I want to vote for money for the auto industry. But we don't have any choice. And I think in the end, the same as what happened with the banks, that most members of the House and Senate who want to act like grown-ups will think this is something we need to do for our country and for our economy. But you know what is really kind of amazing? I sat in this hearing, and what Senator Tester said that you had on 4 or 5 minutes ago is exactly right, that we bring in the auto industry. We want to know exactly what what they're doing, exactly how they're spending their money, exactly what workers are making. And we gave to the banks $25 billion to 3 different banks, hundreds of billions of dollars to Citigroup, tens of billions of dollars to AIG. We don't ask how they're going to spend the money. There's a real sort of class difference here that Republicans really wanted to beat up on auto workers, and there are a lot of union and non-union people alike in this industry, the suppliers, the auto workers themselves, others, people working with their hands, making 30, 40, 50, 60. Some are making 70,000, maybe even 80,000 a year. Most are making 30, 40, 50,000 a year. Good, solid, middle-class families. But they don't ask about AIG, where there's not just the top executives, but hundreds of mid-level executives making 5 and 10 times what auto workers make. They don't wear ties to work. Maybe that's part of the reason that they attack the auto workers and not the AIG people that dress more like we do. But it was not a pretty sight, frankly.
Yeah, we've seen 2 very different bailouts for the 2 very different Americas, and it divides right on class. Yeah, Democratic Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown, member of the Senate Banking Committee, thank you for your time tonight. Good luck. Thanks.
Thanks always, Rachel.